Yeah, I've got one here. I already pulled it off, but I didn't know what the second one was for. I was, wait to grab it, but. Yeah. All right. But I didn't know what the second one was for. I was, wait to grab it. Who's unmuted there?
On YouTube.
Let's close that.
Hi,
window.
Mayor.
Hey, how you doing? We're
Good.
trying to get I've got a.
Okay, so we are live on YouTube.
There we go. All right,
There we go.
super. All right, sorry, we're having a meeting ahead of the meeting and kind of lost track of time, so we're a couple minutes late, but like to call this meeting to order, the town council meeting for the town of Apple Valley. It's Wednesday, April 15th, 2020. And first item on the agenda is for Pledge of Allegiance. So I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So we'd like to thank everybody for attending. Let's do a roll call if we could. Make sure you unmute. Let's close out that banner if you can.
Debbie Kopp here.
Well,
Eddie
everyone's
back
here?
here?
Marty Lisenby's here, of course. Let's see. We're missing.
Denny.
Yeah, Denny Bass here. I kind of overshadowed Paul. Sorry about that, Paul.
No problem.
Looks like Mike might be missing here.
Want me to call in?
Well, I don't know if, let me check his number if that's, because we have a call in that's muted.
Imagine that might be Aaron.
Yeah, that's me. It's Aaron, 3130832.
All right, why don't you go in there and rename that to Aaron so we know who it is. All right, we're going to rename it on the Aaron Stout so we know who's there. And anyway, yeah, if someone wants to call Mike.
I'll call in.
But anyway, so the Mayor's Town update, let's go over a couple of things. We had a meeting with UDOT, been a lot of meetings lately, so.
Hey, you gonna get online?
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
All right, so we had meeting with UDOT regarding the SR 59 updates and kind of what's working, what's not working, kind of a conversation. And basically what we've come back with is I was complaining to them about like Cedar Point when they had the flaggers so far away from Cedar Point entrances and exits that people would come out and not know where to go. Is it my turn? It's not my turn because the distances were so great during that time. And anyway, it's more of an analysis and regurgitation of the problems that we had, and we pointed it out to them so they could try and do it better next time for other, another community when they're doing it. The other part of the conversation came up about the rocks on the highway, and when you leave the station, and today for anybody that was out and around today, there's just tons and tons of ATVers that parked in the gas station parking lot today. And my understanding is when they do that, they're heading up to Little Creek Mesa alongside the highway. And that creates a problem for throwing rocks with the knobby tires onto the highway, which in turn ends up causing problems regarding the windshields and so forth. And anyway, so they were talking about the solutions for that, and they said, well, we can put some ballards up or something that help block the trails, because he says, really, it's not legal to even drive on those shoulders. And just got a memo here that Mike won't be attending today, so we'll excuse Mike from this meeting, by the way. And anyway, as they talk about signs, they talk about, you know, some of the solutions that they could try and to come up with. And I just listened for a while, and then I chimed in and just says, I get it that it's illegal to be there, but you know, we've been using that trail along that highway for, you know, many, many, many years. As long as I've lived here, 14 years, we've been doing it, and it's probably gone on way before we were even a town. And unless we're willing to provide a trail on the other side of the fence, chances are they're going to continue to use it. And if it's not given in too much to the normal behavior, the reason they're driving on that new shoulder is because it's nice and smooth. Why don't we consider, or could you consider, bringing in some heavy equipment and leveling out and fixing that trail system that's along the fence? And then when you put ballards up that point them back down towards that trail that is now level and straight and comfortable to ride on, they would probably just as soon stay off the highway anyway. And I was just kind of surprised. Their response was, okay, we'll do it. We'll send a blade out there to fix that road. And so I feel like that was a win for the community, that that road is, that trail system along that highway has always been pretty bumpy, and a huge crown in the middle of it that makes it challenging at times to, you know, to navigate. So,
Well, you know, Marty, I've taken my RV or my bike and my side-by-side up towards the mesa because I don't want to trailer it, and it's at least you could get by before. But after they fixed the shoulders, then now you can't. Now you almost have to go on the shoulders. So it's a good thing that they're going to look at that.
yeah. Yeah, I appreciate that they're going to try and improve it, because that's what my suggestion was, is that I says, if you put ballards, they're just going to drive around the ballards onto the highway to get around it, and then they're going to be back on the shoulder again. And either that, or you got to start writing tickets so they know that you're mean business. So, you know, I was just glad they picked the option of let's see if we can level that out a little bit to make it more attractive for ATVers to be on that by the fence as opposed to by the highway. So we'll see what comes to pass, but that was a call we had recently. All right, declarations of conflicts of interest. Anybody have anything to declare?
No, sir.
All right, and discussion and action. Discussion and possible action on zone change application AV 1335 from commercial C2 to recreational vehicle park zone, applicant Aaron Stout. And I understand Aaron Stout's on the line. The last conversation I had with Aaron was he asked to not discuss this in this meeting. So Aaron, do you still feel the same way?
No, I don't think I ever mentioned I didn't want to discuss it in this meeting. I am interested to discuss it, especially since I have followed up with the county recorder's office and with UDOT on the requirements, as we had discussed a couple of days ago, on the possibility of merging the two properties, which just to catch everybody up on that, my conversation with the county recorder's office, basically they said that it would be like any other merger. It's whether there's a road there separating the two 5-acre properties, and two, they're still considered contiguous properties, and that we would just need to have it surveyed, have a legal description written up for those properties to describe them as one property, and that we would submit that to the county recorder's office, and that pay the fee or whatever needed to be done, and submit the paperwork, and they would actually be willing to just issue one tax ID for both of those properties to merge them into one property. And I know that was a question that we had last time, a couple weeks ago in the last meeting. And so it seems like the process wouldn't be any different from anybody else who would try to obtain, two properties right next to each other merge them into one property to be able to have the minimum 10-acre acreage needed to do an RV park or a mixed-use park for that. I also spoke with UDOT on the issue with, I think it was Jeff. I actually spoke with him earlier today. He sent me over plans of what would need to be done as far as, you know, doing improvements and what that would look like. And that's, as I discussed with you, Mayor Lisenby, that would be obviously something that would eventually need to be done. And I fully recognize that. I don't know what, you know, what conversations has been going on between council members, but I would like to hear thoughts on that.
Are you asking how we feel about the turn lanes?
Well, I more so just asking how obviously you guys tabled the conversation until today, and I've looked into what I can, and it seems like it's something that is very feasible. I don't know if the town council members have looked into it as well, have researched anything, but I guess to put it clear, the way I see this is that we meet the zoning ordinance for the 10 acres and for a mixed use property.
Aaron, Aaron, this is Paul Edwardson. My biggest concern is the traffic coming in there off the highway, the turn lanes, the dedicated turn lanes and acceleration lanes on that. It's quite a bit after the curve, of course, but I imagine, I think that the way most people, when they put in parks or whatever else, that is in place before the park is opened. It's not something that we could do down the road, I don't think, because then it probably would never get done, because it's probably going to be a pretty expensive proposition, I would imagine.
It is, and the thing is, you know, anywhere you put in an RV park, anywhere in Apple Valley, really, turn lanes are going to have to be put in. The benefit to us doing it right there is that we can add it to our existing property. And so to make turn lanes for both sides of the highway, you need 5 lanes. There's already 4 lanes there. And so 2/3 of the improvement has already been made. And according to Jeff with UDOT, we would need to extend the Apple Valley side of that a little bit, and then basically add in another whole lane along that entire section and meet with the standards that UDOT has set forward with turning lanes. Yes, it would still be an expensive improvement onto the highway, but it wouldn't be as expensive as if we were to do it elsewhere. Now, obviously, we're not looking at putting in as big of a RV park there. It's only 5 acres, so we're proposing 50 RV spots. But, and this is a conversation that I had with Marty a couple of days ago. We brought this up, but you know, right now we have turning lanes that are being used for our side of the highway, and I understand. I'm fully aware that those turning lanes were intended for Desert Rose, and if Desert Rose ever is a go again, that they have full right to have the highway restriped and have those turning lanes used for their property. I understand that. But I wanted to bring up this point that I'm not trying to in any way to get out of the responsibility of putting in that improvement, that extra 5th lane, so that they can be used on both sides of the highway. But as of right now, it is currently being used for our side of the highway. And it would be a great benefit to us to continue to use those. And then once we get the RV park built, we'll have a tiny cabin park and an RV park functioning as one property. Our revenues will be much higher. They'll be, probably double. And we'll be in a much better place to be able to put that improvement in. But by saying that it has to be done right now when it's not necessarily needed, but, I understand the town, wanting that assurance, but it's basically asking us to do something that would be much more difficult for us to do right now, but would be much easier for us to do once we have that revenue stream coming in, that additional revenue stream from a 50-unit RV park. The town's getting benefit out of using those turning lanes for the south side. And I'm just asking, give us the benefit too. And when the time comes, or even maybe before, I don't know, but I'm just saying, give us the opportunity to be able to put those in, because obviously it'll be much harder for us to do, before anything happens.
Anybody else have any comments on that?
I have a question. Aaron, it's Debbie Kopp. If you're
Hi.
saying it would be better for you after your kind of
You're-
project,
You broke up there for a minute.
Your sound went away there, Debbie.
okay. What kind of projected income do you think you're going to get, and how long would it take for you to be able to afford to put those lanes in?
Well, we project just from doing some rough projections about for a 50-unit RV park, somewhere total revenues of about anywhere between 600 and 750,000 per year. And the good thing about RV parks is that the operating costs, especially with labor and things, is much lower than our current parks. So even though the tiny cabins they make more money, but the net income or the net profit that we're making is actually less than an RV park would be. And if we had that RV park up and running, I would imagine that even if we didn't need, even if Desert Rose hadn't gone in yet, if we were able to build that RV park, I would imagine within a year or two that we would have the operating income to be able to do something like that. And that brings up another point. The fact that if the RV park does go in, and at some future point Desert Rose goes in, the town doesn't lose. The people that live on Apple Valley Drive does not lose their turning lanes because we would be. Because I know the town's not going to probably not going to be willing to do it. So it would fall on us, and but it's solving a problem for us and for the town to have somebody else, a developer, actually put those in.
So just to be upfront with the council, what I've argument with Aaron has been that there's really nothing that we can do once that RV park is built to there's no mechanism that says you have to write a check for $100,000, $200,000, $300,000, whatever the cost of that extra lane would be. I would imagine it's at least $250,000, $300,000 to do the lane, and there's no mechanism that we can put into place that says you absolutely have to do that at any time, even including when he's already open, already been running, and Desert Rose takes those lanes back. And that's my concern, is that as soon as we say that it's approved, then we have no recourse other than a court battle that could be brewing in the future. There's no way that
Does the town, well, does the town not have the ability to take away my business license so that I can't operate?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, is other than by a legal means where we take away your business license, we can take away a lot of things. And then that's just where we both end up in court, and then we're taking on an argument in the future that, yeah, but there's this many more homes that are built up there, and now the town's responsibility is 100,000, 150,000, and we're stuck in this, argument over whose fault was it that, those turn lanes have to be put in, and that's, this is what I've shared with you already. I'm not telling you anything that you and I haven't talked about. I just want to make sure that the others have heard it, that I feel like that's is putting us in that kind of position. And that's why I feel like that, even if we felt good about everything else, that is the number one issue that, becomes a deal breaker for me personally, is that we don't have any way to, because we had originally had a conversation at the end of phase 2, I think it was, that at some point when Desert Rose would do that it would happen. And Harold Merritt says, yeah, I'll help them. And, but there's no mechanism that, lets me, I don't know, really just to be able to force that to happen.
Yeah, I would have to agree with Marty there. I think that the way it's done almost everywhere else where a person wants to put a development in, that they have to put in the infrastructure, and that infrastructure includes a turn lane. It's expensive, yes, but let's say the economy goes south and you're not able to do it. Well, how can we hold your feet to the fire? So I'm just more comfortable if you do it the way everybody else does it when they develop something. I know it's expensive, but at the same time, you got to spend it to make. So that's my opinion.
The other factor that we haven't talked about is that we still have a public road with the same parcel number on both sides. And I don't know that that's even though the solution can be that the county will let us do it, I don't know that that's a good precedent set. And, I can extend out a scenario that similar situation can happen where someone has, 7 acres one place and 5 acres across the street, and they're going to combine them to make one RV park out of it because, before the road, it was one single tax ID number. And in some cases, it is still even a tax ID number that can be the same. We have situations we have had where they were divided by SR 59, yet the same tax ID on both sides of the highway. And so if they combine those together and say, we want to make one RV park, even though the highway is dividing it, I just think that having this public right-of-way of any kind going through the middle of a property becomes problematic as far as setting a precedence in the future as well. I'm personally not comfortable with it. I don't know how others feel about it, but so.
Well, and that's why I brought up, the argument last time that, I think it would be extremely rare. I'm not going to speculate, but it seems like it would be rare for this situation to happen again. But that's why we brought up the whole situation of the fact that, to put that road in, that it was donated to the town, and now it's only hurting the chances of Harold Merritt and Terry Robbins to even sell that property because, the most in-demand uses for that property now do not meet the zoning ordinances for tiny cabins or RV parks. I just can't see what else would be in demand for 5 acres right off the side of along the highway. And so considering that it was one property and that the property to put the road in was donated.
Well, if you look at
I basically would be asking for the town to make a small exception, but at the same time, if you're really worried, about this being a precedent, I that can always be used, saying, listen, this at one point, this was one property. And yes, it is divided by a public road, but we basically took it from 2 tax ID numbers back into 1 tax ID number, only because at one point it was 1 tax ID number. But you could tell anybody in the future, we're not going to make that exception, because with, somebody else's project where they're proposing, 2 properties be merged into 1 on 2 sides of a road, you say, well, they were never even 1 property to begin with. However, Gooseberry Lodges was 1 property. And so obviously we, made an exception, and it's not going across the highway. It's only going across a very small road that was put there to give access to our property and to the residents that live on Apple Valley Drive.
And today, just to bring you back around to something you were talking about, is what else could go in there. And, that has a C2 zoning right now, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct?
I believe so.
And so with a C2 zoning, we have a list in our code that says, here's all the things you can do in C2 zoning. And that list is extensive. And it includes things even like a hotel. You could probably squeeze a hotel on a 5-acre lot. And in concept, a hotel could go in there. And so it's not a matter of we're never going to have anything there, because it is already the zone C2. They wouldn't even have to bring in the paperwork probably to even planning to even approve something like that, because of the zoning. They would be bringing in a project that's just for,
Yeah.
approved, for C2. And, obviously we've intentionally, the planning commission at some past date has pulled RV parks out of the C2 zoning, because they want to be cautious of where fifth wheels and motorhomes, things like that are traveling, pulling trailers, and where that traffic goes and how it impacts those that live right there. And that's why they have done what they've done. And, so this is why, you can make the argument that it's hurting the Terrys and the Merritts because of their willingness to bring that road through their property. But I would argue that it wasn't as marketable property prior to that, because of the angle of the road that used to intersect there. And since the water line was brought down, after that they brought a hydrant there that didn't used to be there. And all of that helped the value of those properties right there, just being on the highway with an entrance and exit. And so I think there's
were those water, was that hydrant and that water line paid for? I would imagine that they paid for that to be brought down. And even if they hadn't have put Plains Drive in, they still could have easily brought that line down, just like they did, because it's only on Apple Valley Drive. I get that they put those in, but it didn't take putting in Plains Drive to be able to put in the water to those properties. Going back to, other C2 approved businesses, I didn't say that there weren't other things that could go there. I just said that it's extremely unlikely, based on current demand for property and businesses in Apple Valley, that anything else would go there. I really don't see, a big hotel or a big restaurant that would need 5 acres or anything like that. I'm talking about businesses, really the only businesses that are actually in demand to go in. That was my point, but it doesn't make much difference. But
yeah. So where are you at on this, Aaron? Do you want us to take a vote on this, or do you have some more homework that you feel like that you want to do prior to us deciding, where are you at right now?
Well, I would like to know, I guess to clarify one issue is the town saying that it's not feasible mainly because of the turning lanes, or it's not feasible because of several reasons that would basically, kill this proposal. Because if it's based on turning lanes, yes, it's much harder for us to put those in, but I'm not saying that it's impossible for us to put that in before we begin construction. It would more so just be a favor, and whether it would be attorneys writing up an agreement that the town and I could sign, saying that if I didn't put those turning lanes in, that additional lane in within a year or two or whatever the agreed upon date is after being open, then I would have to close my business. I mean, that wouldn't be, it would be a pretty straightforward agreement and contract with the town that I would make. And that, yes, of course I would put those lanes in after a given time, or I would have to shut down my business. It's not really something that would even need to be taken to court because of the plainness of the language in that contract. Now, is this hinging upon the turning lanes, or is it hinging upon these other factors? Can the town do something to see this through if we came to some type of an agreement, or if we did put in those Highway 59 improvements, or are other issues? Is the town just not going to be willing to work with this type of situation?
I'm sure, Aaron, this is Paul again. We all have our opinions, I suppose. In my way of thinking, if those 59 turn lanes were put in before you built, then I wouldn't have as much of a problem with the town road bifurcating your properties. I just wouldn't. I'm not sure what anybody else thinks, but
I agree.
my biggest concern is the Highway 59. I think that area right down there is a perfect area for that kind of thing. But my concern is the turn lanes. That's just me.
Denny, do you have any thing you want to say on that? And you got
I have one question. Aaron, have you done a traffic study, or has UDOT done a traffic study based on what you want to do?
No, they've never done a traffic study based on this because, we're just in the initial, inception of this. We're just at the beginning phases of looking into doing this. When the traffic study was done for lowering the speed limit down to 55, they only did a traffic study right there where they actually changed the speed limit zone. And that actually brings up another hypothetical scenario of us having the, 35, 36 tiny cabins, which is what our plans call for, in addition to a 50 unit RV park. At that point, the UDOT would have much more reason to actually extend that 55 mile per hour zone all the way up to just before our property. So requiring us to put in turning lanes to fulfill the requirements for a 65 mile per hour zone. I know that's at least, a couple hundred or several hundred feet of additional turning lane as opposed to doing a 55 mile per hour zone. Because if we did put in an RV park, chances are it would drop down to 55 before our property. And that's another thing is do we want to have to pay the additional tens of thousands of dollars or even $100,000 to meet the requirements for a 65 mile per hour zone when it very well could be a 55, right when we open?
Aaron, do you have a limit on the length of RVs that you're allowing in your park?
We could put a limit on it. We could make it so that anything, 30 feet or under, 33, I think once you get to that point, we would still want to allow gooseneck or fifth wheels. But as far as bringing in huge motorhomes or, I would be actually fine to put a limit on that.
Because I do have a concern of people pulling in 40-foot motorhomes or 45-foot fifth wheels coming off the highway right there.
I understand. Yeah.
Okay.
And we could also look at the possibility of widening Plains Drive by another, 5 or 10 feet or whatever, to help with that or to mitigate
think-
any problems there.
Have to be necessary to get some of those big rigs off the highway, wouldn't it?
I'm not sure. This is all, this would all need further research. We would need to widen the entrance because right now that road, Plains Drive, it comes and meets up with Highway 59 at an exact right angle. It doesn't curve out at all. And so that would definitely be one of the improvements that we would make is we would widen up that entryway onto Plains Drive, making it so that you didn't have to drive through gravel to exit off of Highway 59.
Okay, thank you.
Could we get Sean's input on this while we have him here?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. There are a couple of things. I think absolutely in this case, you could require those lanes to go in when this project is approved. As you know, and it's unique, but the lanes that are being used right now are lanes that were put in by the adjacent property owner for that adjacent property. And as an interim, kind of a nod to Aaron to help him out, we allowed them to restripe it so that it was utilizing those, but that property owner could come in at any time and say, I've already put in my lanes and I want to use those. And then what happens? So plus the additional demand on the highway, and I certainly don't think you should take into account whether or not UDOT in the future will lower the speed limit. You have to look at what the situation is now. So I think you can require those. Certainly if you were going to delay it, you would want to have a bond posted on that, because you never want to use a business license or the threat of shutting down a business as the way to enforce a development agreement, which is essentially a contractual agreement. Also, Marty did bring up, it wasn't just the turn lanes that was concerned about, but it was also the precedent that would be setting. So you'll want to consider that too. Not saying that there aren't some unique circumstances. Aaron's done a very good job of bringing up the circumstances. I would not certainly say that that in the past it was one parcel. This one is kind of different because it was a parcel and then they dedicated that roadway while it was still one parcel. But as you know, most properties here were part of a larger parcel at some point in time. And so using that straight, just using that as one of the criteria, I'd be careful about doing that. So you have some ways that you can do it. You certainly could deny it too, because of the precedent it sets. But I do think you can require that those turn lanes either be installed now or that they post a bond and have a time frame during which they have to actually construct those turn lanes, or you foreclose on that bond.
Yes. All right. So on the precedence, that's just as big of a deal to me as the turn lanes. And we're in the middle of, for example, realigning Main Street. We're moving where that road is, and that particular touches a couple of different parcels right there. And you could be in a place where, someone is, the property is left over where they want to put what they want to put, used to belong to, it now has a road intersecting that parcel even right now. And those parcels will probably have the same parcel ID number. And, do we want to set that precedence where, yeah, they've got 9 acres on one side of the Main Street, yet on the other side is their other acre, but we're only going to really use the 9 that's on the other side. We're not going to use the other 9, but because the parcel says that, we're setting a precedence by, combining something that once was. And that's, it just kind of bothersome to me because there's so many places I can think of right now that this is going to bite us, because of some conversations I've had with different projects that are on the books right now and in a similar situation to this. And I don't like the precedence that it sets myself, but, if you wanted a answer today, Aaron, we can, put it to vote if you feel like that you want to have some more conversation about the possibility of these turn lanes, because I think that the minimum would be that we'd have a bond posted, which basically means you're paying for the turn lanes without paying for them, without putting them in. And posting a bond means that it, I don't know what all that entails, but it pretty much would mean that you're putting up the money of what those turn lanes would cost in order to even get an approval. And if that was a willingness that you want to look into, then we could hold off on saying yes or no today and let you give us some feedback on how you feel about that. If you have a time to think about this, we could put this on our next agenda and give you some time to figure out if that's what you want to do.
Sure. Just to address, one thing before I answer that, it's that, we still, the town still, for the property to have been donated and not sold or, taken by eminent domain or whatever, it helped the town. I just want to reiterate the point that, yes, we would be asking the town to make an exception, but, it would be an exception based on the fact that the town received financial benefit from that road going in. And, of course, we would be asking for a benefit there. Now, addressing...
Let me just address that real quick, if you don't mind. I would say that would be the only reason that we would even consider it is
Sure.
that item. If it wasn't for that, we probably wouldn't even be looking at this. And I don't know that we're going to do it, but I'm just saying that's the only reason we'd even consider it is because of that. Just,
Yeah, I would like time, and I appreciate that. I will tell you that I would like time, meaning that to put this off for one more meeting. Are we having another meeting in 2 weeks from now?
It's about 3 weeks away, I think, is our next one. It's the first and third Wednesday of the month. So.
Okay. Well, that'll even give us more time to look into it, because I would want an engineer to look at this and determine, based on UDOT's specifications, what is required. And then I would like to take that to a construction company to get a bid on just a rough estimate on what that would be, to put those in, or to at least post a bond for that. And so
I appreciate your talking to UDOT as well, and I would think that if we were going to approve something like this, that we could get a commitment from UDOT that they would move that sign down to your property line to slow that traffic down, and then you are putting in lanes that are 55. And I don't think it's beyond their ability to give us a commitment on that as well. So.
Right, and Jeff also mentioned with UDOT that the way the lanes are striped right now, if you were to put in another lane, restripe everything, he actually said, just looking at the map, that we may not even have to put in the full width of another lane because of some of the extra room and the way it's striped, that it may actually be a more narrow addition to the highway to accomplish that 5-lane intersection. And so, the fact that most of the improvement has been done and that it's only a portion of it left that needs to be done, it rather than picking another piece of property where we would have to put in 2 additional lanes, it just, to me, it seems like a feasible project because of that reason. And so, yeah, I would like the opportunity to, 3 extra weeks to go through and have this designed, and then take it and get a bid, a quote on it, and see what we're looking at. And then that will give the town council also, time to look at this and for you guys to decide.
So I'm going to just give you a date of the 29th of April. If you'd like to be on the agenda for the first meeting in May, I would need to know by the 29th of April so we can get you on the agenda. And
That's fine.
and that's not that you got to give us the answer by the 29th as much as, well, we got to have some information basically to know what we're going to talk about. But that gives you 2 weeks to let us know that you want to be on the agenda. And if it goes past that, we can push this another meeting. I'm not trying to hurry or rush you as much as I can't have you walk in on Wednesday and say, can we talk about this tonight? That's all of that exact
Yeah.
meeting. I just need a week's notice because that's how we try and get the agendas out a week ahead of time. So, that gives you 2 weeks really before the meeting agenda is put out. So, sound okay?
That's fine.
So I
Yep.
I would move that we table this item for future meeting, and we'll leave it up to you, Aaron, to notify us of when that future meeting is based on, our normal process, where you just get a hold of Ben and say, well, I'm ready for it, or call me, whichever. Does that sound okay?
Okay.
And so I move that
Yep.
we table that. Can I get a second on that?
A second.
Second.
And vote?
Aye.
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 And we're gonna still, because we're on video and some people are on, they're not on video, they're on telephone. If you could use your name and then the vote, it would be helpful to clarify the recording for it.
Debbie Cop, aye.
Paul Edwardson, aye.
Jenny Bass, aye.
And Marty Lisenby, aye. So we'll talk again, Aaron. Next
thank
item
you.
next item on the agenda is discussion on Jetson Canyon PID financial analysis. And I see we have Hank on board here. Welcome, you guys. This is what I wanted to do is I get to get in these meetings with Sean and Hank, and we talk about these issues, and we have some paperwork from them. And I just kind of want to update the council in a public way of where we're at with some of this. Hank has done everything that we've asked him to up to this point, but we could be lacking something. Let me get into that. Basically what he's done is the analysis that we included in our agenda packet that tells us, in a tutorial and in a mathematical sense, what it is that all of this means to the town of Apple Valley with his project coming in, what estimated tax revenues. I was in a meeting with Hank and with our attorney, Sean, who's online. He's going to talk here in a second, and I scoffed at the notion that we even need the financial analysis for the reason that I can see that whatever we get from Hank is basically a wild guess. I mean, there's no way that anyone can predict, the number of, covers you're going to sell at breakfast in a new restaurant that you're building in Apple Valley with any kind of accuracy. And it's, so the financials I feel like are, kind of something that Hank's put together as a hope and a prayer that they want to generate. And it's probably important that they look at these kind of numbers, and it's probably important that we ask them, but at the same time, it's everything that's in this financial document is almost a crapshoot, really. And at the end of the day, we look at the project and say, what does it do for the town? Does it bring, a new water tank? It brings more water rights to the water district. It brings in some roads and streets and improvements and things like that. And some of those can be considered a liability. And that's part of Sean's point, is that every time you're building a public road, that becomes a liability. And is there some business sales tax and revenue to the town that's going to help you maintain that? Because just a normal street or like in Cedar Point or something, the tax revenue that you get on those homes does not pay for the maintenance of the road you have to dip into other funds to be able to afford to do that. And that's why he really pushes hard for having some tax base in there that's, you know, retail, things like that. So the reason I decided to talk about this in this meeting, besides we owe it to Hank to make a decision on this, but I also wanted to talk about this because there's another project that is possibly in, that's being discussed. I don't want to say it's, we've discussed it enough to say anything's a slam dunk, but I was toying with the idea that what if we used a PID to help bring some improvements to this area that would require turn lanes and new turnoff, and it would require you know, some water line improvements and probably even sewer line. We haven't got any details worked out, but there's a chance that we could partner with Hilldale and use their sewer ponds and bring a sewer line over with pump stations that basically put us in the sewer business and also helps us get rid of our septic systems in any future developments. And so, you know, a project like that, we haven't analyzed it, but let's just throw a number out there for the grins of it. Is, let's say it's $3, $4, $5 million. And we end up with a improved water line, improved water system, maybe a connection from Canaan Springs up to the 1 million gallon tank at Cedar Point, and turn lanes and new roadways, and the ability for someone to build in a development that gave us, that was on sewer systems. And you know, if you had something like that in that, you know, lower $3 or $4 or $5 million range, and we have absolutely no commercial in that project, would that make sense to, is that enough of a benefit to us as a community that we would engage that that PID? Would that make sense somehow to us? And, you know, I read this by Sean, and he says, well, yeah, it sounds like you're getting water line improvements and things like that we desperately need, connection or sewer line brought over that's, you know, bringing it closer to, you know, other future developments that would also need that sewer line. And we can see where just that alone, because we're bringing these improvements to the town of Apple Valley, that could be some public benefit to everybody in town in some way. And Hank's project, what we have built into his PID is a 1 million gallon tank up on top of the mountain there. We have infrastructure, water lines and things like that are built in. They're probably overall not as impactful, but well, even for his, actually, he would be partnering in on that sewer line that needs to come in. And so there's another benefit, that anyone that's between Hilldale and Hank's property would have the ability to hook into that sewer line for the future, which helps if someone decides they want to build a hotel on Main Street. Now the you know, you have a close reach to that sewer line that has been pioneered by Hank. And I can just see where the project itself, because of the commercial nature of it, is going to have obviously some numbers as far as impact to the town. Anyway, my cynical way of looking at some of this was, there's a lot of things besides the dollars and cents on his project that could be considered a huge benefit to Apple Valley, and others could argue a different way, but that's kind of how I was seeing it. So I wanted to let Sean give you his rebuttal on why it's important that we have this financial analysis done, and then I'm going to have Ben do it, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about the financial analysis. So, Sean.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Hank. I saw that you got us the extensive data that would better help analyze this. The initial data presented to us was on a one-page sheet. And even the bond attorney that spoke to the council you'll recall that, and he's very good. I've visited with him on numerous occasions, but he acknowledged that we would need extensive financial data in order to get the bond. So all we're saying is we need to get that data up front that you're going to have to put together anyway in order to go secure the bonds. And then we take that to a third party to analyze that data for the town, because they have the expertise to do that, the third party, and then come back and say, we do think this is a feasible project, and we do think that the amount of the bonds is in line with the public infrastructure costs that you will get. And here are the benefits that you could quantify out of the project. And here's also the mill levy that you will need to, or that will need to be assessed to those properties in order to pay back those bonds and make sure that there's the cash flow. Part of that is the timing of the project. Obviously, kind of the situation we're in now is a good example. If someone had just actually began a project like this, had already issued the bonds and had the proceeds, and were starting their first phase, and then had something like the COVID-19 virus hit and put a stop to it, then all the projections for the revenues that would come in that are generated by the increase in the taxes that you would get because the property is more valuable would come to a screeching halt, and then you'd have the bond payments there, and you don't want a situation where they start having to foreclose on properties in that project. Even though the recourse is not to the town, it still doesn't reflect well on the town to have that happen. So that's why we requested more information, and it's good to have that. They've submitted that now, and my understanding is the mayor's contacted Lewis, Young, and Birmingham to see if they could analyze that data for the town. Any costs that we incur, we could put back to the development and recoup those from the proceeds from the bond. In the end, you could get paid back for any expenses, or you could ask the developer to pay those expenses up front, and then the developer gets them back as part of the bond proceeds. But I think you're in a good position now to have them analyzed, and thank you, Hank, for getting that information. I see that Devin Snow is on the line as well, their attorney, and I thank him for meeting with us and moving that along to get that data. But again, this data that we're asking for is just prudent and data that would have to be gathered, and probably additional, more extensive data in order to go and issue these bonds. I think the town's learned a painful lesson from the Gateway project that you want to make sure that the numbers pencil out before you authorize anything to move forward. Now, it's one last thing I will point out here, and that is the ongoing costs. You do have to realize that the public infrastructure that's put in, there will be an ongoing cost to maintain those. And so in theory, from what I've seen from Hank's project, he has some revenue generating businesses in there that will not only generate property tax, but also generate sales tax and also the transient room tax as well. So there are some revenue generating entities or proposals in this project. It's not just residential alone. Thanks, Mayor.
All right, thanks, Sean. It's kind of where we're at. Did you have anything you want to share, Ben?
I think Sean pretty much summarized my concerns. I mean, with the infrastructure that's going in, there are future liabilities, immediate liabilities on maintenance of that infrastructure. And I mean, my initial surface level analysis indicates that the revenue that could potentially be generated from the commercial development side of the project would be enough to cover, it would be sufficient to cover the costs of the maintenance of that infrastructure.
So as, I want to boil this down. I don't know if you guys have had a chance to dig into this. It's several pages long and there's a lot of numbers on it. But it seemed like that last page kind of says it all based on their analysis that there's, am I wrong in saying there's around $2 million of potential revenue? So they're looking in the future saying that if they're built out, if they have the homes built out and the commercial aspects in, the sales tax, and we boil it all down in their, in their dreams, what they want to create, they feel like it would be upwards of even a couple $1 million to the town between tax revenues and sales tax, if I'm not mistaken. So anyway, we're going to have Hank, what we're doing is I do have the information sent up to Jason at Lewis and Birmingham. Is that the right name for that, Sean?
Yes.
Birmingham or Birmingham. I'm not sure which is the right pronunciation, but we have that sent up to them, and we should hear something back the next week or so, and we'll be able to at that point, have a further discussion on moving ahead with this if that's how everybody feels. Do you guys have any questions for Hank or on these numbers, or for Sean or myself or for Ben?
I don't.
Mayor, keep in mind, those numbers, the up to $2 million, that's projected over the next 6 years.
Right.
And it will only increase years 7 through 27. So.
Yeah, thanks for that. And how about Debbie? Do you have any questions on that at all? You're on mute still.
No, but that income sure would be nice.
Okay, Denny, you got anything you want to share?
I just have one statement that I think you already covered it, but my concern would be that actually the town received enough of the revenue to maintain the roads if needed. If not, then the developer would come out and cover the results or whatever was left over to maintain the highway, maintain the roads within the development. Or I think as Sean already said, that would be part of the agreement.
Well, there's two parts of that. I haven't, he's given us a list of what the roads are here. When they dedicate those to us, that becomes our problem. But in his development, there's a lot of gated access. And once you go beyond that gate, those are not public roads. Those are their roads to maintain anyway. And so we're not taking on but about 2.4 miles of roadway. And the rest of the roads that are in the community are private, behind private gates, and they would be responsible for all those anyway.
That's
Okay.
correct.
Okay, any other questions on this? All right, well, that's all I wanted to accomplish, is just to introduce the idea of some of these financials, so you guys have plenty of time to look at them. And we'll probably talk at our next meeting as well on the same subject. Hopefully we'll have some feedback and analysis on this. And in the meantime, though, is that if you have any particular questions individually, feel free to bring the document in. And Ben has spent a lot of time looking at this as well. He's being shy today, but he's and possibly can help you make sense of any questions you might have about anything that's on that document. So anyway, so I think we finished up number 2 for right now. You have any questions, Hank?
No, thank you very much.
All right. Well, thanks for attending. On our budget.
By the way, I'd just like to point out that the good news is that we hadn't started 2 years ago, because you're right, we would have been bankrupt by now.
Yeah.
But if we can get started this summer on our infrastructure, we'll be ready to go to town first of the year next year. And the Village of Many Nations is the first phase, and it's right there on the highway. And that generates a lot of money, both for us and for the town. So that's the good news.
All right. All right. Well, thanks for your feedback. And I'm going to move on to discussion and action on item number 3. So it's budget time for all of us. And we are supposed to have a tentative budget passed by not this meeting, but our next meeting. And so we wanted to start the discussion now, and I'm going to turn this over to Ben to discuss any issues that he has. He has the ability to share this on screen. So, you know, I'm just, I feel naked here without my mouse. He has my mouse, so I can't control this thing. So, but anyway, I'm going to turn this over to Ben for right now to talk budget stuff, and then you guys can feel free to chime in.
So this is kind of a scary time to be creating a budget. I'll just lead with that.
In fact, Sean's on the line. I'll just, while he's bringing this up, I heard in one of our mayor calls that St. George is trying to cut their budget by $19 million because of the COVID. They feel like they're going to be hit by that kind of money.
Luckily for the town of Apple Valley, we can make some pretty conservative revenue estimates and still really maintain pretty much the same level of service that we've been providing. You know, we have to make some adjustments here and there, tweaks, but for the most part, I think probably the most relevant thing to talk about as we begin the budget discussion is how do we budget for our revenue when it's so unknown. The first real month of sales tax collection in based on the changes from COVID-19 with everybody staying at home and all the impact of that. We actually won't even see that until we need the end of June is when we see that. So we will have needed to adopt a budget at that point. This is, like I said, this is a terrible time to be trying to adopt a budget. I used some really conservative numbers in building this budget out. So I have not yet shared the screen, but I will go ahead and do that. So in the packet is this budget. I haven't made any changes since generating the packet. There are some things that need to be changed, but I kind of wanted everybody to see this first version as we go through the budget. So I did something a little bit different this year in budgeting. This column, if you're looking at my screen, it's column K. This is the final total budget values that are being proposed in this first round of budgeting. So as I did, the column K is definitely the most important thing to look at. And what column K is it's for most categories, it's the sum of column I and column J. And column I, if you see in the header row, is considered estimated revenues and committed expenditures. What I was trying to do with this is basically say, and this primarily relates to expenditures. Maybe I'll scroll down a little here so we can see this. Where do we have some flexibility in the budget? Where have we committed expenses, and where do we have some room to move around categories and allow for some flexibility? And so anytime you see a value in this column, in column J, that is what I would consider a little bit more discretionary. It's not committed. Now that said, all the values in column K, they could be adjusted. It would just be a little bit more painful. So it would just require a little bit more work, and we'd have to finagle some things around in order to make changes to that column. But in the end, column K, the totals are what's most important. So starting back at the top, just kind of the tutorial for the budget this year is to understand that all the revenues are in green. So in column A, in the first column there, just for clarity, the distinction between revenues and expenditures, here you'll see that revenues are in green, and once we start into expenditures, that's in red. Just so that you understand where as you're working through the budget and doing a lot of scrolling, it's easy to see that. So for property taxes for 2000 that will be collected here in December, there's a big unknown in property taxes, and I used an approximation of the reduction in property taxes from 2008, from less healthy fiscal period to the few years leading up to that. It was about 90%. They were collecting about 90% of what they were in healthy periods. So that's what I assumed on this. Based on property tax assessments, we can see that we went from 107,000 to 111,000 in this next year. For sales tax, I used a really conservative number here. We went with, we're on track to exceed our budgeted value of 96,000. And for 2021, for the next budget year, I'm proposing that we only budget 80,000. So that would be a huge hit. And like I said, where St. George is having to make these huge cuts. Our cuts consist of $20,000, so not nearly the impact that some of these larger entities are having. I was also pretty conservative with projected home builds, that's a source of revenue, but also a corresponding source of expenditure. I estimated that we would have 8 new home builds in 2021. Again, these are just very unknown values, but trying to be conservative. And again, so we talked about this in our last town council meeting as we were reallocating budget categories. The town of Apple Valley doesn't really budget for slack. We don't have a lot of room to move. And so as you get towards the end of the year, we have to start looking at the budget again and maybe reallocating some expenditure categories. And that's what we did 2 meetings ago. And this budget year is going to be no different. Especially with cutting the estimated revenue, we don't have a lot of room to pad any categories. So like I said, as we move through this, I highlighted all of them in yellow, but on these screens, all the items that are probably require a little bit more explanation in yellow. So I think the first one that we came to, besides the sales tax projection, is the state grants category. So the state grants category is these are grants that are already awarded. We already have in the bag. These are for the impact fee facilities plan, as well as the FEMA application assistance, the CIB. Both of these grants are through CIB. So these are already in the bag. I'm projecting that we won't. I'm budgeting that we will not finish the IFFP, that's the facilities plan, this fiscal year. So we're allocating about 50% of what's left of that to bleed over into the next year. I put in a value for an interlocal agreement with Big Plains. This is a category that for a long time through fiscal year 18 was a source of revenue for the town as the town covers some of the costs of the district. This is an unknown at this point. Both entities would have to agree on the numbers, and I think we're getting closer to doing that. That said, Big Plains is going to have to address some deficiencies in order to make that happen. So as we keep scrolling down, under miscellaneous revenue, there's really nothing. We don't have anything that's really out of the ordinary here. Some impact fees. I didn't budget, where last year we budgeted a fund balance appropriation to fund the impact fee facilities plan. We're not drawing on the fund balance this year in this budget. So this is in its current state and as required by state law, is a balanced budget. So that said, I think we can move on in the discussion from the revenue category into the expenditure side. And a lot of this is simply incremental budgeting, using what we've done in the last year and what we've already committed to. So on this line here in engineering and professional fees, we have $55,000 allocated. This again ties back to that impact fee facilities plan and the FEMA application that Sunrise will be working on. So this is definitely a committed expense. There's really nothing other noteworthy in the administrative categories, nor in general government. So public safety is where things get a little interesting. There is a discussion of engaging in a memorandum of understanding, an MOU with the county, with the sheriff. And this is the category where we would budget for some of that. So that's something that we need to keep in mind as the sheriff's office approaches us with an MOU. I don't anticipate it's going to be a really heavy MOU. It's not going to, I guess we'll see what they propose and what we agree to. So we'll get that number plugged in here in the future, in the coming weeks, hopefully.
Oh, just for the conversation's sake on that part of it, is the discussion we've had so far would be on a, as we call them out basis. So we would just get an invoice, we call them out on something, they send us a bill for $45, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So, but you're right that we need to probably have a number in there, $1,000, $1,500 at least, and, you know, so we probably need to allow for that.
So then as we move into the fire department, you know, prior to this, one of the priorities that I wanted the town council to consider for this year is some of the capital outlay. So I feel like there's some deferred maintenance issues that I think the town should consider, the council should consider as we move into this budget year, and I'll be addressing those. And the reason that came up in the fire capital outlay, this was discussed briefly last week or 2 weeks ago, is when we reallocated money from upkeeping the out-of-date engine that's in the fire bay, the structure engine, and instead of putting money towards, you know, something like new tires, we put that money away in capital outlay for a future acquisition. So in this budget, this first round, there's some money, $5,000 there allocated set aside for an engine. I think the council should come up with a goal for an approximate time when we would like to be able to afford that engine and how long it would take to get there and how much it's going to cost. $5,000 probably isn't sufficient to buy an engine in the next 3 or 4 years. We probably need $10,000 or $15,000 for an engine that was going to be compliant with fire standards, but it's at least a starting point. So another one is PPE for fire gear. This is something that is flexible in the budget, but it comes up every year. With the volunteer fire department, guys have to be equipped with equipment, and people don't always have the same shoes as the guy that they're replacing. So it's important to make sure we allocate some funds there so that we can afford the fire gear for the volunteer fire department. Another one is road equipment maintenance. This is something that has kind of caught the town off guard a little bit this fiscal year, and I'm proposing that we be a little bit more aggressive in our equipment maintenance for 2021. Now this is the big one in our roads capital outlay. So a few years ago, with the Gateway project, the town did a double chip seal. The estimated useful life of a double chip seal is 7 or 8 to 10 years, if I remember right. The note that I made on the budget is that the remaining life is estimated of that double chip seal at 3 to 5 years. The initial cost associated with just the chip seal on the roads was $205,000. So to take assuming that it had a 4-year remaining life, we have to set aside $51,000 this fiscal year in order to replace that chip seal at 4 years. These are things that I would like the council to consider in this fiscal year. That would be a huge portion of the budget, but otherwise, if we don't do this, then we could have that chip seal that's kind of falling apart in a number of years from now. We may be able to baby it along a little bit more with patching it beyond the 4 years. I'm certainly no roads expert. A lot of the information that I'm getting about the life of double chip seal is simply through a Google search, and I'm openly admitting that. So, like I said, I'm not an expert when it comes to roads, but I think we need to be conscious of what needs to be set aside for road maintenance and capital outlay. So that said, moving on, sanitation is pretty straightforward. We have a revenue associated with the cost. This is purely driven on the number of homes. That doesn't require much explanation because it's that's a contracted rate that probably shouldn't change through the next year. Park maintenance, I feel like how we handled the park maintenance last year, it worked really well. We contracted that out for a what I thought was a very reasonable price. And that reduced the equipment maintenance, it reduced the mileage expense. I thought it worked well, and I think that I would propose that the council do that again moving into this summer. That said, we kind of come back again to this outlay, capital outlay. Our budgeted RAP tax revenue for the fiscal year 2021 is $9,000. And based on the estimated costs for parks, we only have about $5,000 of eligible expenses for our parks. And so I would recommend that we consider some projects that we can set money aside for in parks. And then that said, so this value here of $15,000, that's essentially what's left over at the end of the budget. So this is either to contribute to our rainy day fund or could be allocated between other categories. It's $15,000. So that kind of wraps up my budget summary and how this document's laid out. I'm definitely open to any questions that you guys may have.
All right, Debbie and Denny, you guys want to unmute and chime in, Paul? Everybody's muted over there, so just make sure.
Ben, I have a question.
Yeah.
Line item 3420,
Okay.
are they going to have any amount that they're expected to earn revenue in this year?
So here we are talking about the fire department contract. This is where the fire department goes out and works on a fire for another agency, and that becomes a source of revenue for the department. For this year, our fire chief is now, my understanding is that he will be certified to go out on fires outside the county. I don't know if we will have, so one thing that we would need in order to do that would be to have a brush truck. So he would be going out in the Type 6 engine, that's the F550. We would need a brush truck here remaining to handle any needs of the community. And in order to do that, the Hummer that's out there would need to be retrofitted with the pump and tank, which would have an additional cost as well. At this time, I don't have any amounts budgeted under the fire department contract for the next fiscal year. And the primary reason for that is because with the fire chief being the only one who can leave the county for fire assistance, last year there really wasn't any opportunity to do any of this fire contract work within the county. The fire chief said that there was one fire last year in the county that they could have possibly been called out for. So at this point, I don't think it would be prudent to budget for a fire department contract. That said, I think I would like to get more input from the fire chief. I've talked to him briefly about it, but I think he'd probably be the best person to discuss the future of fire department revenue.
Yeah, it's a little bit concerning to me. As a couple of years ago, we decided to put out the outlay for the truck, the brush truck that we got, that it would be paid for by those funds that would take them out of state, and that's got no traction so far. It would have been nice to have that because I think we pay, what, Ben, we pay $1,200 a month for that vehicle.
Pretty close.
Yeah, that's right.
That's a lot of money, and so I don't know. I don't know what what it would take to get that truck ready so that we could actually put it on the market, as it were, for the regional fires, interstate. That would be something I would like to know, because I voted for that truck based on the possibility of earning that money back with that truck, and that hasn't happened. So that's a concern I have.
Well, I think if we put down there an expectation of 0, that what we're going to get is 0. I'll just put in my 2 cents on this, that when so I was appointed mayor in September of 18, and I had a conversation shortly after that with the fire chief, and they had only brought in a few $100s of revenue at that point in that particular budget, and he assured me that that wasn't going to be the last of it, that they would be bringing in more money in the springtime, and that never happened either. And I just think that we have to have something built into this budget that's an expectation of somewhere close to what he promised that we would be having. And so we'll bring this up to him and see what feedback we get from him, and maybe we can include that in the next budget part of the discussion. So I appreciate
Yeah, I think that if we can make a positive advancement towards getting that truck out to, I can't remember the amounts of money that it was supposed to raise, but I know it was a lot. I mean, per firefighter, per truck, to go to California or Nevada, wherever these fires are. That's a considerable amount of money. But if we can't, then we don't need the truck, as far as I'm concerned, because the whole point was to make it pay for itself. So hopefully we can get that going.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks for your feedback. Any other questions on the budget? Any suggestions? Ben brings up a good point on the roads. I think that we should talk about. We have Cedar Point, for example, that really needs a seal coat and cracks filled out there in a desperate way. And I think that when we potholes that need to be fixed, and we had an estimate at one point, it's upwards of $8,000-9,000 to fill all of the potholes, and I'm not even sure we're including the one that's missing over there in Cedar Point, and doesn't include the chip seal. And it could be that what's right is that we get an RFP out that at least gives us an estimate of what it's going to take, so we know what we got to wrap our head around. But the deterioration of the roads is a concern to me, that every year that we don't do something, they're getting worse. And I was hoping that we'd have enough money left over that we could do some improvements towards Gooseberry and come up with at least the main road improved to some degree with even chip seal. Would be really nice if we at least went out there as far as we can and lay something else down. It would be really handy. We were talking about in our staff meeting this morning, as you go out to Gooseberry and there's that turn, it's we had some good rain, and one of the fun neighbors put some toy ducks out in the middle of the roadway to emphasize that we have a duck pond out here, and is pretty cute. Made it on Facebook, but it emphasizes that we got a real problem over there. We've got to elevate that road. We need to probably improve the drainage in that particular place, and that's going to take some money to do that. And we get BC road funds. A lot of those monies go to the Gateway project to pay payment on that, and we get along as best we can with our volunteers, like Jerry and Richard Fisher, these guys that are out there, Denny even, that are driving those trucks and equipment to help save us some money. And so everything we have is precious left over. And one of the thoughts I have is that we have to come up with probably a budget for next year that is going to encompass some type of improvements, and when can we do it? Because the thing is even with the Gooseberry Mesa area, you know, if we at least did the main road, you know, that would be a step forward that, you know, gets that washboard out of that main around the corner, at least, kind of a thing. And so what does that kind of cost us to do, and have it budgeted, so at least we're setting aside some money to do some of these things instead of just floundering year to year, you know, and nothing happens. I just like to, but the truth is I mean, we just, you know, we have, our needs are way over any budget that we could probably have. And until you get some sales tax revenue off of a project coming in, it's a challenge. And that's how towns, as Sean has indicated on our last discussion, that's how towns pay for these roadways, is through sales tax and things like that. And that's what's going to change our life in Apple Valley, is when we have enough sales tax revenue that helps us augment our budget to where we can make some of these improvements. And until then, it's a challenge. There's no doubt about it. A couple of other things I want to bring up. It could be they're in the budget categories, but they're the things that I think we should talk about. One of them is the water districts. We've been carrying the water district as far as the finances go on the bookkeeping and so forth. I think that there's also probably a revenue line item there that we should be adding to this budget, that, you know, effective the new budget, that they start paying for Ben services. And we, in the past, I think there's a lot of money that probably changed hands, and Ben and I are just on the same page. We're just looking at just, you know, recouping a little bit of what he does. So at least we have, do you have a ballpark idea on that number? You know, it's a couple $1,000 or something, I think is somewhere in there, wasn't it?
So for the total interlocal agreement, I put 30,000 for.
Okay, so you've got that in here already?
Yep.
All right. So, you know, I didn't catch that in here, that he's already included it in there. So $30,000 total with revenue. Anyway, so that's some money that's going to come in that hasn't been in the past. The other is the mayor's salary. Luckily, I'm not thinking of getting a raise or anything, but I was thinking of what could we do with a donation of the salary to the community, and what projects need to be done. I've already talked about a couple of projects, but I want to make you aware of a couple of others. And I got a text photo just a couple of days ago, and our dump truck back here, it's not worth a bunch of money, but because it's in the back of the building, it's we've had the battery stolen out of it. And now some kids have taken some rocks to the windshield and broke the windshield out of it as well. And it probably doesn't have a significant amount of value, and that's why we haven't done anything with it. We've had an offer from somebody to buy it for like $1,000, and it just seems so ridiculously low. It hadn't been on the front burner because of that, but now it has broken windshields too. But anyway, I just think that the security around here is lacking as far as camera systems. And so I think that that's a project that's worth considering. We could also consider going back there where that truck is and creating a yard where all of the equipment is behind a fenced gate that helps make it a little less tempting for someone to help themselves to the equipment because it's behind the building. With increased surveillance and a fence, I just think that it would save us money over the long haul. But we also have the needs of the roadways and so forth. And so I just wanted to put it out there that I've committed to helping with the salary for the town bathrooms. I've got a commitment from them. That's probably in the next week or so from starting the undergrounds on that. And I'm kind of a wuss. I don't like going out in the freezing cold and doing anything. So I haven't been worried about that all winter long. But it's getting nice weather now, and it's time to get this thing knocked out and done. And I'm in the mood for it. And so it's time to spend that money. But basically, we have all of last year's salary for the mayor that we haven't spent. And part of that is committed to the bathrooms. Part of it's not committed. And then we have a new budget year allocation. You know, if we need to divert some of that to do a, you know, some of the filling of the cracks out in Cedar Point or something like that. I think we just need to think about what needs to be done in town. And you guys might even add to this list, but the needs as far as a place to park your equipment where it can be a little more secure. We can add some cameras out there that help, you know, since we're doing the park anyway, we can add power to the pavilion, which is part of our plan. Because we have power, we can add cameras to it that are on our recording system that would help deter some of that, because you have cameras that can see behind the building would be a help. So those are some things that we need to prioritize and see, you know, based on what you guys think or any projects I'm not mentioning. And let's try and figure out where we want to allocate the mayor's salary. It's roughly just under 10 grand. And there's probably some taxes that we would normally have in our budget that we could throw in as well, that we would be part of paying that salary. But because we're not paying it, it's money in our budget that we could probably allocate to some of these other projects. And I'm happy to throw that in if it helps the community, and we can try to knock off a couple of these needs that we have, whether it's roads or some improvements wherever. So anyway, I'd like each of you to think about that so we can have some kind of discussion on it at some point. So, are any comments from you guys on the budgets you'd like to bring up?
I like the thought of having security where the equipment is in the back.
Okay. Paul?
Yeah, I'd rather build a fence before cameras. That's just my thinking. You know, for the equipment in the back.
Okay.
Nothing like a good fence to deter people from just
Does it-
walking through.
One of the thoughts I had at one point that was having that equipment out front, making it higher visibility in that area that's dirt over there. Where does it make more sense? One person in our community has suggested that putting the equipment in plain view of the you know, entrance to the community and the park didn't bode well with that person. But what I like about it is it's also puts it out front where people can see it, and it's less likely to get messed with compared to behind the building. So so those are all ideas that we got to consider. Where's the right place to put this kind of equipment? We'll probably end up having to run power to this location as well. We're going to want to be able to plug in battery chargers, things like that. So having some kind of proximity to, you know, power would be helpful. Anyway, it's just, I want you guys to think about it, because it's time we've got to get something going on this equipment. I hate to see the, you know, things getting torn up out there just because there's nothing, there's no cameras, there's no fence, there's no nothing. So, Denny, you got any ideas?
No, I think the fence towards the front, maybe towards the left side as you're going out, would be a good idea where it's visible. And there's other people will be watching it around there. There's no doubt about it. But I got one question or one statement about the roads. As far as Cedar Point and South Side Estates goes, with the exception of a couple holes that have to be patched, if we went out and tarred those cracks like we did about 3 years ago or so, I think that would take care of the roads for a while, instead of spending hundreds of thousands of dollars to have them resealed and everything.
What have you done this before, Denny?
Yes, we have. We did that about 3 years ago. I think it was about 3, Ben. You can, I don't know, you can check the files and see, 3 or 4.
All right.
Was that all contracted out?
Did they just rent the equipment, or how did they accomplish
No,
it?
yeah, we rented the equipment and we just bought the materials. And we had somebody drive in the vehicle that pulled the equipment and a person behind it with a hose that actually sprayed the tar and filled all the cracks. It could have been 5 years ago, but it's been quite a while. It actually turned out real well.
Okay. Well, we need to put that on our radar for this season. I feel like those cracks are widening out there, and I don't want to see those roads fall apart. And we got to give them some love. There's no doubt about it. And I feel like the Gooseberry curve out there where the duck pond is, we've got to do something with that as well. And I want to get maybe you, Denny, and Richard over there and take a look at it and see what solution we can come up with that curve. So at least we have an idea how we got to fix it, and then we'll know what it's going to take to create a solution for that.
Sounds good to me.
Okay. Or, Jerry Jorgensen, he'd probably even know, have a good recommendation because he was in that business. So you and Jerry could even go over and look at that stuff and come up with a solution on that. Anyway, let's talk about it another time. And anything else on the budget you guys want to talk about?
Mayor, I have one thing real quick. I just thought of, if you put the machinery in the front against like where the cemetery is or was supposed to be, that would be one less side of fence you would have to make.
Well, that was my initial thinking as well. I'll kind of repeat back some of the comments I got from that was, what about the neighbors that are on the other side of that fence? Are they going to care that there's a heavy equipment parked now on their fence line? So that would be something. Do you feel like we need to get permission from the neighbors? Do you feel like it's it's okay because we're looks like Danny doesn't like that idea, so. I love it, Danny. I can see you. Instead of you sitting next to me, I can look at you. So anyway, I felt the same way, that it's a commercial property back here with the town, and having something, we have a privacy kind of a fence there anyway, that it's, and they're not going to be parked right on the fence. It's going to be, I picture it as being a, place where you can drive in, you make a U-turn and you're heading the equipment back out, so it's going to be a big enough area. And it's actually one of the spots I thought of, Debbie, was that fence, because that area, because of the location, it's out front where it can be seen better. We actually have cameras on our building already. We can point that direction, and then it solves a couple of problems. And we have that length of fence that we wouldn't have to buy. So anyway, you guys think about it. And if there's some other feedback that you want to give us or something, feel free to, let's talk about it. So any other questions on the budget or things we've discussed?
No, I think Ben did a very good job on the budget, Ben. Good job.
Yeah, I think I'd like to have just one-on-one conversations with everybody and just make sure that we iron out any concerns that everybody has before we propose the tentative budget. So Paul already mentioned he'd be coming in next week, and Danny and Debbie, you guys come in anyway. So I'll give Mike a call and just make sure that we all kind of get that one-on-one time with it, so they can.
And we were on one of our mayor calls. There's some active legislation that might happen. Sean, I don't know if you've got any updates on that, but he had mentioned that they might be delaying the budget requirement from the first meeting in May, tentative budget, to the last meeting in May as a requirement. Do you have any update on that, Sean?
I don't have an update. The session starts tomorrow, but I will tell you that I think that's highly likely to pass.
Okay, so it could be that we have one more meeting after this that we do it, but we could be ahead of it and already have it figured out by the next meeting. But anyway, so I think item 3, discussion on budget, we're pretty much done there. Do you have anything else, Ben, to add? Or
Nope.
Okay, and so reports and announcements. We don't have any events going on because of COVID-19. I don't know if Tish has got anything she wants to say, but with
Yes,
nothing
I
going on, I'm
do.
not sure there is.
If
Yeah.
you got a minute, I do. So just while you guys are considering budgets and the finalization, there's $500 in the community event supplies budget. And I
Chances are
recommend that we use that elsewhere.
Chances are we might not use it at all.
Right. Well, we won't use it. So it's up for grabs. So if we need it for something, consider using it somewhere else.
Okay, all right. All right, so we'll probably just move that someplace else then, and Planning Commission, I don't think Janet's on. Fire Chief, I think, is off on a family matter. Big Plains, Denny, do you have anything you want to share on
Yeah.
that?
The only thing we have to mention on that is that the Canaan project, the state told us today that we had to have a special meeting to accept the grant to do the Canaan project, but it has to be voted on by the total board. So we'll have a special meeting tomorrow to vote on that. And then hopefully within the next week or two, then we'll be able to get the funds to get started on redoing that Canaan project.
I had a meeting with Harold Merritt too on that project with Rod Mills and Harold Merritt, and they feel like that when we get finished with this project, we're actually going to have a significant increase from the several hundred gallons a minute we had, because there was a lot of because the way it was done before, we weren't capturing. It's kind of like you got water coming out of a large area and you put a piece of pipe right there. There's water leaking everywhere else, or from
Yes.
the pipe. And what we're going to be doing is doing it the right way, which will capture more of it, and we'll probably end up actually a significant increase in the amount of spring water we're capturing. So anyway, we're looking
Yeah,
forward.
once we get that fourth spring cleaned out, where they'll be put in big new pipes, we'll get a lot more water out of that spring. You're right.
All right, and now we got in-house is code enforcement, Rich Osowski. Did you have anything you wanted to?
Yeah,
Talk
there's
about?
a couple ongoing things. We got some property that they're just continuing building on. I put a red tag out there and it was removed, so I'll be installing another one this week. And the fire chief is working on a location that he's already determined where to put a fire hydrant, so that'll help in the process of them eventually getting a permit. And then we have a vacant lot that they seem to be using for equipment. And that fell through the cracks, but I guess we're back on track again. And I think basically that's about everything. We're just gonna get kind of caught up on a few other things.
Okay. All right, so I think we've talked about roads enough, and is there any other comments from the council?
I don't have any.
So, and then I will open it up for public comments, but I see that most people have dropped off the call, so, but are there any public comments from anybody? Jerry and Wen, that's the only ones here besides the council. And Tish, do you have anything you want to say publicly? All right. So, I don't know. All right, so we'll
Yeah, I do. Have you got a sec?
You bet.
So this morning on the way to work, there was probably 100 ATV trailers and trucks at the station. And, I realize that it's, social distancing, but I'm thinking long-term, these people that come out here and they do their jamborees and they use our roads and they kick up dust and all that fun stuff is great. But talking to the folks at the station, they're not buying anything. They're not buying food or drinks or things like that, where they're putting back into the community. And I would like to see somebody from the town reach out to this club or this organization that's doing this and see if we can't get some sort of, cooperation and, let them help support Apple Valley a little bit, in the sense that they're using our beautiful landscape, and maybe they'd be willing to, have them make some pizzas or something like that at the end of their ride. Just,
Yeah.
have
Uh,
the town get something out of it.
I'm gonna let Sean talk about this one, because you guys are in that same place where you have people visit all the time. And what's your take on the Jamborees coming out and using us like that?
As the meeting place, and I think Tish is exactly right. I hate to admit this, but before I became the town attorney, we used to meet up at the Chevron and then take off from there to go wherever we were riding or doing our whatever we were doing. So I think that maybe there's some kind of, there's nothing you could do to require them to do anything, but certainly maybe some signage or a campaign that you could come up with that would encourage people. Hey, that if you stop, shop, that if you're going to use the restroom there, which is what a lot of people do, is they just stop, use the restroom, and then leave. Something that you could come up with that encourage them to buy something there while they're in town.
Yeah.
But certainly nothing that we could do legally to do it. But I was guilty of that too. It's a convenient place to stop and hook up.
And we don't know that there's a problem. I haven't talked to Jan about it over the station to find out. I mean, she could feel like it's, if it's an encroachment on her property, then it'll be up to her to say something. But at the same time, I'm wondering if, the amount of shopping that they do get out of it is worthwhile to them. I don't know what the answer is to that, but anyway, we'll take that to heart, that there could be some reach out done to those people to let them know that if you stop, you should shop. And that's probably a good way to put it, Sean. So I appreciate your feedback on that. Any
May
other
I add
comments?
something?
Yeah.
On the same line as what Tish said, in September, when we used to have Founder's Day, we have the Ironman, I think is the same weekend, and they use Cedar Point as their parking spot for the porta potties. And they park the cars and their trailers up and down the road that you can barely see to get out onto traffic because they're blocking. And that's been for years in the Cedar Point Circle.
Okay. Yeah, I know a lot of communities, they invite that stuff in, and so they must be, where they have hotels and restaurants and things, they probably get some benefit overall from having them. And out here, we get the traffic and the leftovers. So anyway, good points to be made. So thanks for your comments. Anything else from anybody? So I'm going to close public comments. We have a request for closed session on our agenda. I don't think we need a closed session today. So we will not have a closed session. And the last item is adjournment.
I make a motion to adjourn tonight's meeting.
Second.
And vote.
Debbie Cop, aye.
Oh, Edwards and I.
Danny Bass, aye.
Marty Lisenby, aye. And thanks for attending, and appreciate your help.
Take care.
Thanks.
Night.